Well, as you can see, we've got a small group of folks who really have some important roles for us. Chip and his three folks with the commission, and we now are going to have three folks focusing on forest health in our school. Kamal Gandhi, who was not here today, that Brittany mentioned, and Elizabeth Benton, who most of y'all met yesterday, who joined us last month in Tifton in one of our new outreach positions. And then we're adding a forest pathology person, Katerina Villari, next month. So we're excited about having pathology, entomology, and an outreach person all within our school. We're not relying on other departments. And so I know they're looking forward to working with Chip and his folks going forward as they have in the past. So together, working with the commission, we're looking forward to having a little bit stronger team in the forest health area. And at this time, we'll open the floor for questions that anybody might have. These are important topics, and we've got some good experts here to answer questions. So, Mr. Hodges.
I'm just curious, on the three types of seedlings, or three categories, what do you have any statistics on the industry-wide breakdown on what percentage are actually being used in planting?
I was at South Carolina's
Use the mic.
for South Carolina. I'm going to quote what South Carolina's seeing. I don't know what Georgia is, but I was at a state conference in South Carolina back in April. And the assistant state forester said 85% of the loblolly pine seedlings sold in the state were open pollinated, okay? And the balance, the 15%, were mass close pollinated or varietals.
Okay, very good. Other questions? Danny?
There's one area of property in Middle Georgia in that high-risk zone that it seems like that there's a significant amount of the pine decline. It's pretty hard hit, and it seems to be coming from one seed source, which is the old Buckeye cellulose properties. Is there any indication that there may be a genetic susceptibility in that it could be somehow related to genetics?
So when it comes to that, it could be genetics, but that doesn't mean that it's southern pine decline. I'm not a geneticist, but from what we have seen by looking at so many different factors, it just seems that this term, southern pine decline, is just not real. And I don't like to say it like that because we do have research that backs it up. But yes, I'm very aware that people's stands, those trees are dying. I just want people to understand that from what we have looked at, we don't want it to be called southern pine decline. It does need to be looked at for everyone's stand, and there's probably different factors that are involved, and genetics could be one of them.
Question in the back.
Well, a comment and a question. I thought I might mention that the Georgia Forestry Association hosted a field day on the genetic improvement that's being made at Arrowhead Seed Orchard in Bleckley County back in the early spring. It was amazingly interesting. I was so impressed, and I think we'll probably do that again this year. So you might want to listen out for an announcement about that. But the other issue I wondered about, with these improved seedlings and the rapid growth rate, have you had enough data yet on what their susceptibility is to storm damage?
As a general rule of thumb, the faster the growing tree, the more susceptible it will be to ice, snow, and strong winds. But in biology, it all depends. I went through Hugo in 1989, and when you're at a Class 4 hurricane, it doesn't matter what species you are or what age you are. You're going to have a problem. So it all goes back to the specifics, really, in the end. I will say this, that young stands, regardless of how fast they're growing, in looking at ice, snow, and strong winds, about age 10, unthinned stands especially, they're a lot less susceptible to ice, snow, and strong winds than older stands, especially stands that have been thinned. I think we all can attest to, whether it's lobslash or longleaf pine, in the first 2 years after that thinning, they are very susceptible to strong winds, ice, and snow. So genetics and growth plays a part, but in the end, it's a small part, depending upon what part of the life of that stand you're in.
Let me ask follow-up on that, David. Some of one of the selling points for the MCPs is the better stem form. Does that perhaps give them a little better resistance against wind throw or breakage?
That's a good point. I was on a tour, I guess 4 or 5 years ago, mostly in South Carolina, looking at the MCPs and the varietals, and Phil Dougherty, who at the time was with Arborgen, he did show us that there was an ice storm in a part of South Carolina, and the best trees went through those storms, but that storm in particular, better than trees that were very branchy or had a lot of forks. And so better stem form will help you with those storms. That's a good point. Thank you for asking that question. Yes.
Question here.
I'd like to direct the question to Forester, Georgia Forestry Commission. Somewhere back in 1980, I was working and buying procurement back in the West Georgia area, and it was hit by the southern pine beetle. And if any of y'all ever seen the devastation of the beetle, it's unbelievable. And I walked for so many, almost miles, to try to find one live pine tree. And the beetles could, as you mentioned, could only take so much of it. The question I really wanted to ask, as far as a landowner being able to try to fight, I know report it, and it used to be the only way you could do it was cut the timber and move it out, or in the method that they had, I don't think there was any kind of spray or any chemical. But also by doing that, was some talk that it was a spread in Savannah when the timber was being transported out. I think it was coming out of South Carolina, that some of the southern pine beetle also was transported to that area. And you probably remember that it was hit pretty bad, and can't remember the date. But the question is it still mapping out certain areas once you find the infestation, or is there anything that landowners can do to try to help?
On all the infestations that we have, I've had that question asked several times about moving from the woods to the mill. Can you spread it? Yes, you can. Normally, we don't have an issue with new infestations popping up from where the woods are to the mill. As far as the mapping goes, that's why we're in the air as much as we are right now. Our pilots are looking for it, and actually, our foresters, from the time they get it, and it's changed a little bit since the 70s, okay? Our technology has really grown, and we are able to pinpoint it a little bit closer on the ground now, and we catch it a lot faster than we did in the 70s too. Because again, I believe in the 80s, late 80s to 90s, we began doing a much better job on managing our timber to where we keep them in a much healthier state. The best thing you can do, again, is thin. But now when we find spots, we used to not worry about anything under it was under an acre or so. Now we're looking at number of trees when we're actually identifying it from the air. The pilots are putting good points on it, and then when the forester has it in his hand, the standard operating procedure is he has 3 days from the time he gets it in his hand to be on your property, talking to you, finding out how bad it is, actually going ahead and delineating out the outside edge. And that's how we're able to get a lot faster movement on these spots and able to help the landowners that are being hit.
Very good. Other questions? Got one over here, Jeff.
I was just going to mention that Dave did a great job. I think to echo Dr. Steve McKeon with the North Carolina State Tree Improvement Co-op, that buy the best genetics you can afford because they pay for themselves. You've got a lot of options nowadays after 60 years of tree breeding. And we've got about 20 years now in MCP development. So it's not something that just happened overnight. And we're actually starting to thin some of those stands, and the numbers are holding up. Varietal-wise, we've got about 15 years now. So we're just edging towards first thin. So it's a pretty exciting time to to be in the southern yellow pine plantation business.
Thank you.
Got a question here, Dr. Dickens.
Okay.
Given the changes in land ownership in the South in the last 30 years and the reduced number of large firms owning land, how are the tree improvement co-ops funding themselves?
That may be more of a Wayne Bell and Jeff Hill question.
Okay.
It is tougher, I will say that. It's harder and harder for our co-ops at the universities to maintain the level of funding needed to have a viable program. So Wayne, do you want to?
They face the same pressures as state associations like this one have faced with the mergers and acquisitions over the years. Sure have. Other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's give these this panelist another round. And just housekeeping, just remind you that we do have the finale of the silent auction starting at 6 o'clock in about 30 minutes. And hope to see everyone at dinner as well. And this is great attendance for this last session of the day. I think we had about 100 people here, so thank you for staying with us and being with us. We'll see y'all in a little bit. Thank you.